Hello there. This is an open letter to Matt Hancock about his recent publicity about dyslexia. Dear Mr. Hancock, it is with interest that I see you raising awareness of dyslexia in the media at the moment, and you are pretty much right in everything you say about the condition and how it goes undiagnosed, as I know from conversations with my wife who is also dyslexic. However, I am sad to inform you that your efforts to ensure that all school children with dyslexia are supported from a young age are doomed to fail. Academies are now profit-making organisations run by executives who can award themselves salary made up of money not spent elsewhere, so they are incentivised not to provide any additional help for the children in their schools. It is no accident that children go undiagnosed with dyslexia. It is a deliberate effort to avoid additional work and cost. This applies not only to children with dyslexia, but to all children with SEND requirements. From discussions with a number of parents and professionals about various academies, it is clear that academies go to great lengths to avoid providing any support to children with SEND needs. Even if it is made compulsory that children are checked for dyslexia, they will still receive no support, the same as most children with SEND needs. I am personally aware of many children in our area who have different reading issues, and none of them are given any support. And new legislation won't change anything. Most academies ignore the current legislation, and there is no accountability. Academies will avoid providing support by firstly not even having a Senko. Although this is a legal requirement, there is no body to ensure this happens. Although most schools do have a Senko, many of them are completely untrained. As long as they have previously been in such a position for 2 years, they don't need to complete any training at all, and they can just make it up as they go along, and no one will ever check. Schools will almost never voluntarily add your child to the SEND register, as this only creates liability and possible extra work, which no profit-making organisation would volunteer for. If you approach an academy stating your child has SEND needs, they can either ignore you or send you to another teacher who acts as a filter for SEND needs and are also untrained. Not to the Senko, as they often see this as an admission that the child has SEND needs. They will also tell you that you need a diagnosis to get on the SEND register, which is untrue, which of course can cost several £100s in most cases and excludes those who are on low incomes. It's apparently this issue that you're initially trying to correct, but only by paying for a diagnosis of dyslexia, not any other condition. If you then try to complain by phone, they can ignore you. If you complain officially in writing, they can throw it in the bin and pretend they never received it. All valid responses to the profit motive. The only way to even get them to respond is to send it by recorded delivery several times, at which point they can actually respond to you. After dragging their heels, they can respond to your complaint by saying they think they've done everything right and you are mistaken. Escalating it to the lab, the local academy board, or board of governors, will avail you nothing. They work for the MAT, the Multi-Academy Trust, and they simply rubber stamp everything the trust or the academy do. The independent governor on a complaints panel is usually from another academy in the same MAT, so the same paymasters as the academy. Often the panel will agree with the school, even when the school has clearly broken the law. Your only choice in situations like this is a solicitor, which at £200 per hour or more, most people can't afford. It took a solicitor's letter in our case after exhausting the complaints procedure, taking months and months, before our son was added to the school's SEND register. At this point, you enter the second stage of being ignored. As soon as you have your child on the SEND register, which can take anywhere up to a year of persistent effort, you're still likely to be seen by the untrained filter staff rather than the untrained Senko. Illegally, of course, but who cares? They are legally obliged to meet with you twice in a year, so week 1 a meeting, week 2 a meeting, and then they can ignore you. There is no legal recourse here because the only option open is an FTT, a first tier tribunal, to try to call the school to account. Although in theory this can be used for this purpose, it is intended for children with an EHCP, an Education, Health and Care Plan, which a dyslexic child would not qualify for. Even if they did, LAs routinely turn down EHCPs, knowing that it costs several thousand in solicitors' fees to challenge, which pretty much stops most parents at this stage. The only option here is to sue for discrimination, which falls under 1 or 2 different acts. Often with good evidence of discrimination, your chances in court may not be better with than 50-50 and will likely cost you several thousand to bring, which again excludes all but the wealthiest parents. Only 1 or 2% of parents ever get this far. It's draining, both emotionally and financially. Most parents with SEND needs will simply move your child to a different school move their child to a different school to try to get better service, which of course is what the Academy wants you to do. Children with dyslexia and other SEND needs will likely need assistance, which the school is disinclined to give. If you have a child with persistent SEND needs and you don't take them out of the school, the Academy may take notice and begin to take steps to encourage them to leave. Off-rolling is now so common in Academy, it is practically a skill set. Firstly, you can highlight the disruption that SEND needs are causing and begin to exclude, blaming the child. This may be harder to do with dyslexia, but shouting at them and embarrassing them in front of their peers may get them to play up. In time, they're more likely to get bullied. If the Academy can find excuses to exclude due to disruptive behaviour, then they start as early as possible in the school year in order to meet the threshold of 45 days for permanent exclusion. However, no one can challenge these exclusions, so the Academy can exclude at will. It is not until they are permanently excluded that any oversight takes place, and this is firstly by the lab, who work for the MAT, and secondly with an independent review panel, which is also run by the MAT. The panel hire their own SEN expert, who in theory should be independent, but of course there is no way of finding out their relation to the MAT other than what they declare. As soon as this final hurdle is over, the child is removed. Of course, the Academy may pressure the parents before the 45-day threshold is reached by having a meeting and pointing out that permanent exclusion is a real possibility and suggesting a local PRU, a pupil referral unit. If the parents go along with this, then so much the better. Now, you may be thinking that there is some sort of oversight of MATs by various government bodies. However, they exist in name only and take great efforts to also ignore the plight of parents. Ofsted are an inspection body only, and they see only what they are shown during inspection. It is not uncommon practice for disrupted pupils to be moved to a separate room for the day of the inspection. Also, it could be many years between inspections. I know of one school in Nottinghamshire that's not been inspected in well over 8 years. And if the school gets an outstanding rating, Ofsted can delay future inspections as much as they want. Although schools should keep records of complaints, how can Ofsted ever verify the school is showing the correct figure? Inspections are a surface scan at best, and although they do sometimes pick up irregularities, many slip through the net with ease. Any further accountability beyond the MAT is usually directed to one of the DFE, Department for Education, ESFA, Education and Skills Funding Agency, or the LA, Local Authority. All three will tell you that accountability lies with one of the other three agencies, and since there is no higher body to appeal to, you have no way forward. Responsibility for SEND needs in practice lies only with the LA if the child actually has an EHCP, which requires a solicitor through the FTT, and which most children don't have. Without an EHCP, none of these three agencies takes any responsibility. Although in theory the LA should monitor the provision of SEND in their local area, this almost never happens, and the LA will simply shrug off responsibility. This is a quote from one LA regarding SEND. These concerns relate directly to the Academy practice and are areas the Academy holds the legal responsibility for. As such, these concerns cannot be addressed by the local authority. The complaints made should be made directly to the school following the Academy Trust's complaint procedure. If you are not satisfied with the Academy response, once the complaints procedure has been followed, you can refer your concerns to the Education Skills Funding Agency, ESFA. So that's the LA saying, no, it's not us, go to the ESFA. This is a quote from the ESFA. We can only investigate complaints that have not followed the Academy's complaints procedure. The evidence that you have provided does not indicate this is the case. The information indicates that the complaint is not within our remit because you are not satisfied with how the school dealt with the complaint. We can only become involved if you are dissatisfied with the way the Academy's own process was followed when handling your complaint, rather than the decisions actually reached as a result. So, as long as the Academy has a complaints procedure and follows it, neither the LA nor the ESFA will ever become involved. And the DFE website, it just redirects you to one of these other two agencies. So you see, there is no accountability by government, either central or local. Academies can do as they please, which means saving money by ignoring SEND needs or actively removing children with SEND needs. Now, this is old news to many thousands of parents up and down the country who have been ignored, many of them with children who are dyslexic. And it is why any efforts to help children with dyslexia are doomed to fail, because schools can simply ignore whatever laws you happen to pass, and there is no one to enforce them. I am yet to see what will happen with the school uniform bill. However, I don't think it unreasonable to predict that academies will simply ignore that as well. If you earnestly want to help children with dyslexia, you will need to overhaul the entire education system, for which you do not have anywhere near the political currency. Helping children with dyslexia would mean enforcement, which would mean changing the system which allows academies, several run by Tory party donors, to ignore the law regarding all SEND pupils. Parliament will never allow this enforcement to happen. When the school uniform bill was being passed, it was several Tory MPs who deliberately delayed the debate. When the crisis of child mental health was discussed in Parliament, 6 MPs only turned up. It is also worth pointing out that it was Labour who actually introduced academies in the first place. So nobody in Parliament wants to see this happen. They don't care. Even if a vast fund were made available to test all children for dyslexia, the support after the diagnosis would never materialise. Each diagnosis would be what it is now, simply another piece of paper for academies to ignore. Now, I really hope I'm wrong, but all my experience so far with the so-called education system leads me to this conclusion. Now, I wish you the very best in your various TV appearances to promote awareness of dyslexia. I'm guessing maybe a book deal. But please keep in mind that the lack of support that dyslexic children currently endure is not an accident. It is deliberately engineered by political parties. Yours sincerely, Mark.